12th of September 1944. Wet ropes and diesel. Karl Weber steps onto the quay. He is a German prisoner of war. He readies himself for beatings and hunger because the front carried such rumors. The British guards are alert but calm. Their orders are clear, not shouted in rage. His goal is simple: survive captivity with dignity and keep his section out of trouble. He must decide now whether to resist small humiliations or comply to lower risk for himself and the men behind him. This first choice will shape his methods, the people he meets, the tests he faces, and what comes of them. Rain needles his cheeks as the line moves past sandbags and wire. The rifles stay low, fingers straight. The men in khaki do not bark. They point, palm down, and the column shuffles when a hand dips and stops when it flattens. He reads the motion the way he once read a squad leader's glance. Ahead, boards with thick black letters and simple symbols mark where to stand, where to place boots, where to wait. He watches the men ahead spread their hands on a table, so he spreads his hands the same way. He keeps his mouth shut so his words will not pull attention. This is his first small method. See the pattern, fit into it, and move the section through without creating a ripple. At the registration desk, a clerk with ink on his fingers asks for name, unit, birthplace. The questions are in slow English, the tones even. He gives each piece in turn, and a card slides toward him with a number that is now his name here. The room smells sharp, like scrubbing, not like fear. An orderly notices the cut on his knuckle, reaches for instruments that are clean and cold, and wipes the skin with a sting that is chemical, not anger. A band of cotton goes on, neat and tight. The clerk stamps the edge of the card, and because the stamp is precise, he believes that the number will follow him through the system, not vanish. Delousing and a medical check follow like stations on a line. He is sent one way for steam, another for a doctor's glance at eyes and gums, a hand on a chest, a note made with a hard pencil. The sequence is the same for each man. Because it is the same, his shoulders lower. The men in his section stop muttering about dogs and blows and start asking, under their breath, about where the boots go and when they will eat. He notes placards again, drawings for soap, arrows for exits, a box for mail, and marks them in his head as points on a map he can use. He is not free here, but the steps have logic, and logic is a kind of safety. At the search table, a hitch appears. A bunkmate has tucked a razor under a boot in the hope that it would pass. A sergeant with a calm face and a worn voice says that hidden blades mean the whole hut will lose something: letters, time, tea. The rule is collective, not personal. Karl decides before the muttering grows. He steps forward, opens his palm, and lays the metal on the wood with his eyes down. He does not explain or plead. The sergeant's head tilts once, the column moves again, and there is no punishment. The lesson is simple and immediate. Preempt a risk and the group keeps its footing. He adds this to his method. The first meal is at a long trestle table under tin lamps. A ladle dips, rises, and spills the same measure for each man. Bread slices are cut to match. Tea is dark and hot and the same size in every cup. He expects a game, a wink, a scrap given for flattery, but there is none. The bowl is warm in his hands, and because each bowl is the same, the talk in his group softens. They still fear the unknown, but their voices lift from whispers to normal speech. It is food with no test attached, and that removes one layer of heat from the room. He eats and keeps his eyes moving, because he wants to see the next rule before it sees him. After the meal, he studies the board with the camp rules. There are numbers and short lines about work and mail, and a heading that cites articles of the Geneva Convention. He knows that name from lectures, but here it is not a boast. It is a set of limits that an enemy says it will follow. A clerk shows a card with squares and lines for a Red Cross message. There is no speech, only a finger that points to the place for a mother's name, a place for a town, and a box where a stamp will go. He writes his mother's name and the village in careful block letters, and he watches the stamp bite, the ink sit wet on the paper before it dries. That mark tells him his reach can cross the water in a way a shouted request never could. The guard who takes the card, a corporal with Evans sewn on his chest, writes each confiscated item into a ledger with the care of a storeman. Watches, knives, razors, each line has a number. The items go into a box not like prizes but like stores. That difference matters to Karl. Anger does not keep books, order does. Bunks are assigned by number, not by who pushes hardest. He has learned now that quick compliance pays small dividends, so he moves his men fast when their numbers come. Because he does, they keep a row together, and he gets a lower bunk near a window where night air can move. It is a small win that will reduce friction later, when tired men bump into new rules. He notes the metal frame, the straw, the blanket that is thin but clean. Lights go out at a fixed time. He lies still and listens because he is ready for the old sounds, boots striking shins, keys rattled for show, laughter with edge. He hears only boots that pass and a key that turns once. He marks the hour in his head. Fixed times mean he can plan. He will sleep by that plan. Morning comes with names called and numbers matched. An NCO reads a short notice about work, about fields and fences, and how men may be sent out to farms under the rules. There is a mention of pay tokens that can buy tobacco or a second cup of tea, and a line about extra clothing in wet weather. The choice is simple but not small. If he volunteers, he gets air, space, and the chance to earn small favors. If he stays, he sits in a room where bored men invent trouble. He thinks of his section's faces, the ones who come to him in whispers when the light is low. He lifts his hand. He picks work. The list fills and his name is on it. The risk is a truck and a field. The reward is a token and a place where eyes are on tasks, not on grudges. On the way out of the office, a folded rectangle of paper slips from a man's pocket and skids under a chair. A British private bends, picks it up, and passes it back without a word. It is a family photograph, a small window to a kitchen that is not here. It comes back uncreased. The act is practical, not sentimental, which is why it alters something. If the enemy can return a small thing without comment, then perhaps he is not hunting for ways to break them. Karl redraws his map. He does not put trust at the center yet, but he pulls fear back from the edges. That night, in the space before sleep, he runs the day in order. The gestures, the stamps, the blade on the table, the even ladle, the rule board, the ledger, the bunk, the key, the work list, the photo. None of it fits the stories he carried from the front. If he keeps reading tone, follows the posted lines, and denies drama its footing, he can lower the danger for his men. That is his craft now. The choice to treat rules as tools in a place built by his captors will shape how his section eats, works, and endures, and it will set the terms for whatever waits beyond the wire. Before dawn the lorry comes, canvas flapping and frost at the seams. 4 of them climb in, knees tight, backs to boards. Hedgerows slide by in a dark rhythm, and he counts the turns because counting eases the weight. Opposite sits Corporal Evans, boots braced, a toolbox on the floor between his feet. The kit rattles on potholes. Karl watches Evans note something on a small pad even before they reach the farm, and he files that away as a signal. At the field, a tailgate drops. Tools come out the way rations did. One by one, number first, then hand. Evans writes each shovel into the notebook and taps a chalk tally on the truck bed that shows what came off. Karl says nothing, but he clocks the point. Everything counted in must be counted out again. That structure is its own guard. They take to the rows under a pale sky. Sugar beet leaves are wet and brittle. He shows his 3 men a pace that will hold all day: cut, lift, heave, and pause. Cold mud climbs into his socks and stays there. When the drains need clearing, he wades in, because going first will set the tone and prevent grumbling. The work is heavy, but it has edges he can see and tasks he can finish. Because it is predictable and outdoors, his nerves settle and his eyes move in wider arcs. At midday, the farmer's wife sets tea and sandwiches on a trestle and steps back. Evans makes a small gesture that says civilians will not touch prisoners. Then he folds his arms and waits. Karl hesitates, reading for a trap, then reaches out and takes a mug. Warmth spreads into his fingers. A line shifts without a word. It is not friendship. It is a rule observed by everyone in the same way, and that is another kind of safety. Back in the hut that night, a Red Cross card sits on his blanket, his number in one corner and his mother's handwriting in the lines. She is alive. The stamped date and censor marks are in the places he saw on the rule board. The system is not a promise. It is an engine that runs when parts fit, and today it ran. He writes back with care, keeping to the allowed subjects, because he has learned that fullness invites the censor's scissors. He tells his section that the mark on their cards has weight, and he points out to them where the stamp landed, so they will read it like he does. The turning point comes quick. A tractor jolts at a rut, a rusted chain snaps, and his glove hooks on a bent link that bites down. Metal pinches flesh and holds. Evans is there in 3 strides, wedges a piece of wood between chain and skin, and flips open a folding knife. He does not cut. He places the knife handle first into Karl's free hand, because Karl is the only one who can see where cloth is pinched. For a breath, both men hold still. A prisoner has a blade beside a guard. He snips the glove where it binds, keeps his wrist low, and lets the knife drop back into Evans's palm. The chain settles. The danger comes down with it. Evans checks the wound, wraps it with tape that is clumsy but tight, and writes the incident in the notebook. Karl adds a lesson. Trust here is not a feeling. It is a pair of practiced acts done in the right order. Winter nears and the air thins. From the chapel hut, a melody floats across the wire. Guards allow the men to sing in German inside their hut. He hears the same carol he knew when candles bent in his village window, and for a moment the wire is a line on a map, not a wall. Because his work detail brings back tools in clean order, month after month, a small change appears. They are allowed to walk unescorted between 2 marked gates on the farm. It is only a straight path watched from both ends, but it frees a step and loosens a shoulder. With tokens earned, he buys soap that bites at the cold and a pencil that fits under his pillow. On the back of his Geneva card, he starts a page of English words he hears often: gate, ledger, count, shovel, so he can follow rules faster and explain them better to his men. Fog comes one morning like wool. A bunkmate leans close and whispers a plan to slip through a hedgerow and follow a ditch to the lane. Karl pictures the chalk tally, the notebook, the head count on the truck, and the farmer's eyes on the field. He measures the cost. Sirens, dogs, a camp search, loss of farm work for all, and the ledger turning hard. He weighs it against the gain, which is a day, maybe two, then a net somewhere in a country that maps its fences. He declines, and he tells the man the count is strict and the field is watched. He is not a policeman, but he is responsible for the men who follow his pace. Because he refuses, the unit keeps its privileges, and the rope they have slowly lengthened does not snap. In the guard hut, a radio murmurs about lines moving across a continent he cannot see. While Evans checks the ledger, he adds a plain remark about why procedure matters. British prisoners abroad depend on it, so their captors must see that Britain will obey rules at home. A posted notice on the wall repeats the same idea in clean type. Karl reads it twice and sees a chain that runs both ways. It is not sentiment. It is method turned policy. He understands that his calm compliance is not only for his own section, it supports men wearing another uniform in another camp. The day they all speak of arrives with little noise. A bell rings and the normal lists keep moving. There is no gate flung wide. Processing begins. There are classes and a film in a hut about rebuilding towns, new tools and fields that will need hands. He sits at the back with his arms folded and watches brick by brick on a screen. It is a future he cannot fit into his head yet. Weeks become months. The work detail continues because the fields still need miles of hands. Rumors rise and fall like wind in the hedges. He keeps to the rules and keeps his section together through the flat hours by giving them the same pace he set in the rows. His page of English words grows. When a new guard reads off a rule fast, he can carry it back and say it's slow. Departure day comes like any other morning. He stands at the gate with a small bundle, a healed hand, and a slip of paper that matches the number on his bunk and the entries in the ledger. Evans meets his eye for a second, then looks down and signs him out. There is no speech, only the scrape of a pen and the gate hinge. The road beyond the wire is the same one that led to the fields. He steps onto it with the same map in his head, the one that turns rules into tools and strangers into steady hands. What he learned will travel with him, and with men like him, and it will make the return road between former enemies easier to walk. Karl leaves with a changed map of the enemy. Procedures, not rage. Respect, not cruelty. The ledger, the even ladle, the counted tools, and the calm hand on a wound have taught him to treat rules as tools, and he keeps learning English with the pencil he bought. He carries that method home, and because many men learned the same lesson in the same way, the policy that held him steady did more than keep order. His last step through the camp gate becomes a small proof that fair treatment in war can outlive the wire and make the road back between former enemies easier to walk.